Hello and welcome to the Permaculture Vine podcast, where we talk about permaculture projects and people. I'm your host, Cormac, and today we have Dave Spicer on the show. Welcome, Dave.
Thanks, mate. Pleased to be here and share my journey. I think that's what the story's about a bit, isn't it? Individual permaculture journey. So, yeah, it's been a long one, but a rewarding one.
Yeah, so we normally just talk about how people came into permaculture and the projects they're doing. So if you want to start there, just how did you get started? How did you hear about permaculture at the very start?
Okay. Um, well, I left school very young, and I actually signed up to be a university student, like a mature age student, after doing some correspondence stuff and getting the grades, etc. And I went to university and I went, wow, geez, this is not for me the first day. And where I was staying, the lady put Global Gardener on. And I seen Bill with his huge big hands. And I thought, oh, wow, this just makes so much sense because, prior to that, I had already done a huge amount of different work from building construction to forestry work to earthworks, working in civil earthworks, um, horticulture, a bit of agriculture. So I already had an array of skills, you could say. And when I seen Bill bring it all together with the directive to act, that just captured me. So I uh, tried to read about it, and I struggled to read, so I tried to read about it a bit, and then I seen a course come up for Bill's course in Tasmania in 1999, and I took that course, and then from there I said, "Well, this is all great and well, but where can I go to get some practical experience?" And then they sent me up to Geoff Lawton at Tagari Farm, prior to Zaytuna Farm and all that sort of stuff at the Permaculture Research Institute. And because of my practical background, I become the farm manager there for a while, and just pursued what I was doing, and then it took a while. I had kids, I got divorced, and then I sort of got into earthworks. I actually worked for Bill in 2007, and they had a little excavator there, and really that's um, what got me into what I do now, which is I do mainframe design, but I suppose what my speciality is, even though we're all generalists, is I'm an operator, so I design sites and then I install all the earthworks, dams, swales, terraces, gradient roads, etc. Um, so that's really what makes my income, and get to have a great impact on people's lives and the landscape and life in general. Because maybe not in Ireland or in a lot of in the northern part of Europe, but in Australia particularly, and I've done a few projects in Morocco. Water is life, so if you don't plant the rain, you got a hard game ahead of you.
Yeah, so even in Ireland, we have periods of drought. We've had a few water bans here. Uh, Particularly down south in the Republic of Ireland, they have water charges, which is crazy considering Ireland rains all the time. Yeah, so you done your PDC under Bill. Do you want to tell us what that was like?
Uh, Kind of mind blowing. Well, in realizing what I didn't know. But the more you know, the more you realize you have to know. But look, I only retained about 30%, if that, of the course. It was certainly enough to get me inspired and want to act. It really gave me the directive to act, which I think is one of the most powerful things that we can take. Um, but for me, what I needed was that practical application. I needed to get my hands into it. to do it. So I was lucky or fortunate, however you want to view it, that I asked Bill's wife, Lisa, well, this is all great. I said, but where can I go to actually get some, practical experience? And they pointed me in the direction of Tagari Farm, which is under the management of Geoff Lawton at the Permaculture Research Institute. And so I went up there and I got to see, the systems in place. I was lucky enough to see a 300 mil rain event, and I got to see all Bill's funky Earthworks work, and that really inspired me. And I had a long working relationship with Geoff for years, and but it really then it sort of I got married and had kids and sort of done my own thing for a while, and um, really lacked the confidence to actually go out and consult, because it is a big step. If you're going to profess to know and tell people what to do, you really should know somewhat. So I made a lot of mistakes, and then in 2008, I got asked to come down and work for Bill in Tasmania, and they had a little excavator there, and they asked me to do some work, so I jumped on it and picked it up. And then from there, I really got intrigued with the whole water retention landscapes. And as an operator now, it's a huge advantage to be able to design, because you design with reality in mind, because you're going to be installing it, so it's a very different perspective. um, yeah, so sort of back to Bill, will really just give me the inspiration to move forward. I know Bill's famous for saying just get out there and do it because you can't do a worse job. But at the same time, we've got to I like to say these days, baby steps, baby mistakes. Um, and I think that's where people need to start, is just at their back door. Start a small garden. Put some trees in. I'm a big believer in now that we need these what I call lifeboats around our houses, and that's good food or real food. Tree systems to do all the functions of sectors, but also, it's quite a spiritual place in a sense where we can sort of we retrieve from the day's work and actually engage in nature, and that's where we learn. Um, because if we our gardens are too far away, well, we don't interact with them, and really, observation is key, particularly well for any designer. I think your greatest asset is to actually develop your observation skills, and to have that garden and tree systems around your house. um, then there's a whole lot of learning that happens through sitting down and chilling out and just observing. I think that's very powerful. um, so I've sort of recently coined the term, good access is good interaction, because if we can't access a site, we don't interact with it. And now, I work on large scale sites, really. The last project I was on in Australia is it's about 120 acres. Now, I'm not working all across that, but it's still, I'm working on the top 30 acres. So if you can't access it, you don't interact with it. And if you don't interact, you don't observe and you don't learn. And, as Bill would say, you've got to plant 100 species around your house, tree species, and then you observe which one of them species do the best, or them the three species that do the best. Then you take them out to the broadacre, because they need no care. It's like I'm not sure if you're familiar with Mark Shepherd from Restoration Ag. He has this saying called "stun," simply total utter neglect. So if you plant a tree and it doesn't make it, it doesn't belong there, because he's dealing with the broadacre. Um, so, I was very fortunate before I come into permaculture that I'd done a whole host of different jobs um, to, well, help me as a designer. Um, so, it's sort of like if you think about keyline layout, Well, keyline's a great system because it's all about parallel tree rows. It's water harvesting and storage, but it's also about parallel tree rows. Because if you go and putting in swale, 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 and then you try to fence around that, then you need all these strainers to do the turns. So practicality is very powerful, particularly when you jump out into that broadacre scale, as far as I'm concerned. Um, so,
Well, you mentioned a few things there. So what I'm surprised at is like, so you got your PDC under Bill, you were working under Geoff, and you felt a lack of
mm.
confidence. So some people would have
Well,
too much confidence and just go out and start
yes,
doing it. It's
yes.
how as a new designer who's just got their PDC, how do they sort of walk that tightrope of having confidence to go out and do work, but not overstretch themselves?
Well, I think like start small. As I said, baby steps, baby mistakes is really important. Um, because it's very easy to do pretty designs, but then they're not reality. And I like that's another saying I say is design to reality. What I've specialised in is a very simple mainframe design. I do very little on zoning because they're evolutionary. So um, if for a new designer, just take on small things. Water, access, structure, position. That is a key to a design process because once you do the water harvesting, water retention, whatever you want to do, once you work with that water and pattern out the water, then your access comes in on top of that because we know we can't fight against water. And access is a great resource for water harvesting or directing water into storages or into soakages. So if you do water, access, and then structure position, where not necessarily structure a house or a shed, it could be a food forest. Well, that food forest needs some sort of water harvesting element and also access to harvest the food. A market garden, it needs access to actually be able to get in there and get the produce out, take the resources in to, build the soil, etc. So I've found water access, structure, position, because what that does is it's sort of like it builds the skeleton of the body. And really, the living system's the flesh, but it needs the bones to sit on. So by just working with water and access as a main pattern, once you've got that set, that actually sets your zoning, in a design. Because if you can't access it, it's not zone 1 or zone 2. You're jumping out to zone 3 or zone 4 or zone 5. You know what I mean? So that really dictates how you move forward. So that's one big thing is start with water. I see a lot of designs have no relationship to water. And like I just think that's the foundation of a good, sensible design is starting with water, pattern out that water retention. Where's the water come in? How can I hold it? Where can I put it into storage? Or, to gravity feed down later. Or if it's a small scale site, one of the things I look for is what hard surface runoff is above the site. If there's a road like the site I just worked on in near Canberra in New South Wales, very little catchment on top of a ridge. The watershed runs off either side, but there's a dual lane highway above it. That's huge amounts of water on a because if you do the math, 10 millimeters of rain on 1 square meter is 10 litres of water. So you put that volume across a road, even a gravel road runs off 85% of that water. So if you look at roads, think about water harvesting. Think about taking off that water off the road and plugging it into the landscape. And once you've got that framework, well, then the site develops itself. That's my approach. And it keeps it very simple because
Yeah.
the site is dictating how to pattern it out. In the end, it took me many years to work out and build the confidence again. But what I worked out is what I'm doing is I'm recognizing patterns in the landscape and then I'm applying another set of patterns to enhance that, or to marry to that. And that's often the client's context.
Yeah,
You know,
as well. And does the client want a plant? Because I've done designs where it's like every square foot I've says what's planted there, which is probably a bit mad. And when I first got my PDC, the first design I did my own property, it's like that. It's like in this square foot, I'm planting a certain plant. And now when I look back on it, it's a bit mad. So the latest design I've done now is more like yourself, more an open, just basically saying there's a food forest there, and then I'm using the plants
yeah,
that I'm propagating, and I'm just putting them in. So I'm not.
yeah,
But
yeah.
some clients do like a list. Tell me what they planted and where they planted.
Yes, this is true, but then that becomes more costly. And is that plant actually suited to that site? That comes back to Bill saying plant 100 different species around your house and work out what species does best before you jump out onto a bigger scale, because that's forced function.
Yeah,
You need to let your site demonstrate its evolution, and that's also why for me, I don't get caught up in zones too much, because I see them as evolutionary. As the client's skills evolved and their interest, may change and veer off in direction. Because really, our job as a designer is to guide them, not dictate to what should go on. That's how I see it, anyway.
yeah, no, definitely agree. And then going
Mm.
from them small designs, baby steps. If someone gets a couple of designs of an urban property, and they want to start dipping their toe in the bigger, grander scale thing, you got in the digger and started working. So that was good. Any advice for someone as well, a designer who wants to sort of take that next step? Because for my situation, that's what I'm trying to do now is
Mm.
get me because I've only had my PDC now, I think 3 years, and it's been
Mm-hmm.
mostly urban places. I'm trying to sort of dip my toe now in bigger projects.
Yeah. Well, but the thing, this is why I like broadacre, because it's very simple. A urban place, you're trying to fit as many different species, annual, perennial, fruit trees. You're trying to stack them, espalier them. You're trying to do all this stuff, and it's very complex. It's a limited space. Whereas when you jump out into the broadacre, that's where I really look at keyline and that sort of patterning, particularly like someone like Darren Doherty's patterns, his designs, because it's very simple. What does the client want? Do they want? Is it pasture? Is it like an agroforestry system? Is it zone 4 as a forestry system? But they still potentially need water. Well, whether they need water or not for establishment, it could be, depending on the climate. They need access. They all need access, and whether that's to move livestock, whether that's to get materials in to plant trees, and whether that's to actually harvest the produce or the timber in the future. But it's just that simple pattern. If you can look at landscapes, some people struggle with contour maps, and I think one of the things is understanding surveying. So get your level out, and if you're in the broadacre, don't try an A-frame or a water level. Hire a laser level or a dumpy level.
Yeah.
A laser level's great because it's by itself. You're only one person. You set it up, and you can. But learning the surveying part is because then you can take your contour map and you can look at reference points in the landscape. Oh, there's a big tree there. That contour line, 210, 200 metres, 10 above sea elevation. I'm going to survey that line out. And what you'll find, most contour maps aren't actually right. They're a guide. As Bill said, the map is not the territory. But they give you a guide to set a pattern. But when you actually survey that work out, then that becomes reality. So understanding the survey part is critical, in my opinion, when you're jumping out onto that broadacre, because then you can look at a contour map, go, okay, well, I can pick water up here, I can run it out there, so you know, and then I've got access down that ridge, or I've broke the site into blocks. I've got what I've found across bigger sites, so 10, 20, 30, 100 acres, is if you can get something like in water retention, if you can get something across just off the crest of the ridge, something through the mid slope, and then maybe something down the bottom, off the toe of the ridge before it hits the valley floor, then really that's enough pattern in water retention earthworks, because that means you can, off that off the ridge crest, you can potentially put a ridge point dam or etc. You can store water. At least you can plant water up the top. Through the mid slope, well, there's where your key point dams are and your contour dams. Um, but you've got your water harvesting element happening. And then that way you've also created a access circulation, you know. So therefore you've already sectioned that broadacre up into 3 zones, if you know what I mean. So you go whether that's tree systems and grazing, very simple. Whether it's whatever you want to do, all agriculture should have tree systems in them. Whether it's for windbreaks or tree fodder systems for animals, or long-term timber species for future fund or whatever. They all should have some sort of tree system in them. So that's my advice: is yes, start to read your contour map, but work out the surveying part, because then you can work out what's reality. And then once you do that, then if you're going to start with earthworks, try to find a good operator and watch what he does. Hire a little machine, build up your skills. It takes a bit, to become efficient and neat and tidy to do this sort of work. But then that's where you start small. If you want to jump on a digger, then you just start small is the best thing. And just like terraces is easy. I rarely do swales today. I still do them as big as shock absorbers, but I do more of a terraced form. There's still water retention. They're still on a level, but they give you better access. Because as I come back to what I said, good access is good interaction, and swales make it hard to access. So I've jumped. If you go onto my Instagram page, you can docspice underscore surgeon. You can see my evolution over the years of going swale, swale, swale to working out. Okay, I want a swale here because it's got a big freeboard, and so it's stronger, can take a lot more water at speed, and then I put it into terraces, which are gentler, less freeboard, etc. Probably should need to really understand earthworks, and to do that, start small. You know.
Yeah, so my front garden, I have sort of a food forest in there, but what I did was I just planted on the slope. So it's relatively small. I think it's like something like 5 meters by 5 meters, so it's quite tiny. And then I just thought, well, I just started throwing stuff in there, but I still could terrace it the way I have it. But what would be the advantages of me terracing it?
Well, I suppose at 5 meters by 5 meters, I could certainly see at least one mini terrace where you could actually take a wheelbarrow in, or get that through the centre. Almost like when you're designing a large landscape, if you can get something through the mid slope, well, that's the best of both worlds, because then you've got water stored up high, you've got it in a key point dam or something like that, and then you can gravity feed down into the better country, down into the more alluvial soil. So, yeah, it's not always necessary, but I just think good access is good interaction. So, depending on what you got in there, but also if you think about the water coming off your driveway, now, where does that go? Could you actually plug that into your garden? So I think that's one of the things that I look at is where's water running off, and where can you take it from that hard surface runoff to that software, that sponged landscape?
Yeah, unfortunately, I have a nice paved brick surrounding the entire garden. So it hits that and it runs straight down.
Yeah.
So that's unfortunate. I would have to, what do you call the guy in Arizona who took a
Brad Lancaster.
yeah, I'd have to do that and take a, what do you call it, a grinder to the new paving.
Yeah, yeah. Look,
Yeah,
Brad does
but
fantastic work in that sort of context. Absolutely. Look, again, look, not you don't have to do earthworks, and what you've done is the right thing to do by creating a sponge is the best form of earthworks because it's created a sink. Um, so, look, don't think you could have done better. The only thing I think about is access, and getting that ease of access creates more interaction, especially for younger kids and stuff like that. But also to take in material to that work site. And particularly when you jump out in scale, that's when access becomes really important. Because on the broader acre, you're really planting along them access lines, because that's where you can bring material in. That's my opinion anyway. And
yeah,
that's what I found is just if we in the broader acre, if we don't access it, and this is more what I found is more for the homesteader or the person new to the land. Farmers, well, they know their land, but often if the landscape's a bit wild and it's uncomfortable to walk, when you actually put in, like I do, I'm not sure if I mentioned in the last section, I do a lot more terracing over swales because I found them much easier for people to maintain, but they create a good access. You do them big enough, you can drive along them. But certainly big enough for a footpath and a wheelbarrow. And you'll find it's like, well, for those who ride horses, if you can get on a horse and ride through landscape, you get into a sort of a zen state of mind because you're not having to watch where your feet are going. Well, if we can create that good access through landscape, we get into that zen state of mind and we observe. And when we observe, that's when we learn. Observation is key, and I think if anyone wants to do this work, really, it's developing that. In the end, it's a pattern language because all I do is recognise a set of patterns in the landscape, whether that's through reading the contour map, looking at aerial imagery, and then also visiting the site. Then you apply yet another set of patterns to enhance the patterns that you've recognised. So that sort of was a real epiphany for me when it dawned on me that's actually what I do. Until then, patterns were a very vague idea for me in a PDC, in a sense, because how do we apply them? Yes, Ekman spirals in wind. Okay, I get that. Shelter belts, we can protect it, etc. But looking at applying patterns to the landscape, that's where, and it makes the design simple because if you design water access and structure position, whether that's infrastructure, etc., then all the rest of the design starts to design itself because you've got them two main priorities, water and access. And then you can interact, you observe, you interact, but you've got water. And water, I mean, water is key. And you can also got movement to bring materials in and bring materials out. Ideally you want to be harvesting something, so how do you get that material out?
yeah. So yeah, I think that definitely applies. I'm lucky enough. My skill, I wouldn't really need a digger on there. I can do a terrace by hand every couple of weeks. So I might give it a try just to do the middle one and see how that works out.
Yeah.
And I'll give that a go.
That's if you want to do the earthworks element, really starting small. I say baby steps, baby mistakes, because all the principles are exactly the same, whatever scale that you're working in. But you want to make the mistakes on that small scale, and get out there when it rains and work out. Make sure you got your freeboard and your spillways set up and all that, and that's easy to do on a small scale. It's fun. You can step out your door in the rain and check it out. So yeah, I'd go for that as a learning curve. and then you build your confidence up to do larger stuff.
Yeah, I did. I listened to a conversation recently on YouTube, and now I might be misquoting the guy. Apologies if I do, but he basically, I think, was saying that unless you're out doing the earthworks, you shouldn't be designing. Now, me, I've tried to incorporate bringing people into the design. So
Yeah.
I'm not saying that I'm the expert of all things, but if it requires earthworks, I'm not going to be doing that because I have no experience. Bring somebody in that you can learn off. That's the way I would do it. But for me to
Look,
learn
I
earthworks,
think you're absolutely right. I've got a good story about that. I was working on a project in New Caledonia, and I turned up as the consultant, and there was 3 earth movers there, and they were like, "Oh, who the bloody hell are you going to tell us what to do?" But as soon as they found out that I could operate a machine, then their attitude totally changed, and they ended up learning quite a lot from me. But it's a very different reality, and that's why I say design to reality, because it's a very different, your viewpoint of what's possible and cost and all that is very different from someone who's actually doing the work, not just designing it, because it's so easy to do pretty pictures that aren't real, and these pretty pictures are often very expensive for the client. So keeping it real, and really for me, I don't do full-on detailed designs. I used to, but that's why I primarily focus on a basic mainframe design, because you can always do more later. You can always put in more swales. I recently done a job in Canberra, Australia's capital territory, capital city. ACT is a territory, but they had another consultant there before me, and they'd done a design. And so on this section that I was working on, I put in 1 big swale, because I'll do a swale over a terrace because of the big, thicker mound, chunkier freeboard, all that. And then I took water from one catchment. There was 2 big culverts coming in off the main road, so a lot of water coming in and leaving the property on either side. And the client wanted to hold the water, so I put in 3 terraces, so one from one valley to the next. So that didn't leave. I picked that up, and then I brought it back around. I built a new dam last time I was there, and then that'll overflow and that'll go back around. So, but the other consultant done probably 15 swales in that section. Now that's a non-reality. I mean, think of the cost. So focusing on that basic mainframe design, the simplicity, and think of water and access. Once you got that, you can always do more. And really, in the end, if the aim is to hydrate landscape, well, bring a ripper in and rip it on contour. Or if you've got livestock, do what they call bale grazing, where you put a hay bale down or a straw bale down, and you pen the animals around it, and they eat it, but they also impound to the ground. So there's a whole host of ways that we can impound water without doing earthworks. My primary function of doing earthworks or focus is to take water, often to harvest water to a dam, so water storage, dam, pond, for irrigation or livestock or gardens. But then I'll do another one to take that water back around to the next dam site. So I won't just do swale. I'll just try to connect major elements. So I'll do a swale or a terrace to feed the dam. That'll overflow. I can pick that up and I can bring it back around in a lower swale or terrace. And that's why I've switched to terracing, because if you do them big enough, well, then you can drive along them and then you can access it. You can access the site. And that's great for whether you want to move livestock along there and do cell grazing off that, or whether it's for interaction, or whether it's to access a block or an orchard block or something that you're developing. So that's sort of my focus. And yes, you need to listen to earth movers if you've got a rapport with them, because a lot of earth movers don't want to listen to you, as in they know boats and you don't. And often when we talk swales, they think contour banks and they think it's got to have a fall. So it's a language that's got to be refined. And if you can communicate with an earth mover, well, stick to him or her, because they're gold. And a good earth mover is extremely gentle. Even with a 20-ton machine, you can be extremely precise in what you do. So if you see someone moving with efficiency, but also finesse, and almost ideally with an artful approach or an artful finish, because I call my work functional art, because I really aim to create something beautiful that fits in with the landscape. So it's not an eyesore; it enhances the landscape. Yeah.
Yeah. So you use the experience of ours, and hold on to them as So you mentioned mapping there. So how much mapping do you do before you get on site, and then on site? Uh, how does that change?
Okay. So look, today we've got quite good contour maps. In Australia and other places, you can get lidar maps, and you can get them generated at a meter contour or 250 millimeters contour lines. When you start getting too small, they get too busy. And it's quite hard to see. So what I'll do is, ideally, the map is not the territory. So visit the site is really a positive. But I do some work I do as an online design, where I look at, firstly, read the client context. What does the client want? What are they after? And then marrying that context to the site. So I'm looking at the site, the contours, and then I'm thinking of, and I design a basic mainframe. I don't get caught up in too much frilly stuff. And in the end, a lot of the time I don't even focus on zones, because to me they evolve over time. Um, so I'll lay out a basic mainframe. So I start with water. What water's coming in above the site? Is there a road? Is there a roof with someone's water tank that's overflowing? I'll take that. Thank you very much. How can I plug that into the landscape? How can I then tie that form that I'm creating into access? Where can I put it into storage for dams? What's the best position in the landscape? And I'll look at the contour map, but if you can get the contour map overlaid with the aerial imagery, because then you can see wet spots in the landscape. Obviously your ridge is going to be drier. You can see vegetation, old trees where you don't want to go near them. So I'll set up a basic pattern, and then when I get to the site, generally what I like to do is not have the machine delivered the day I get there. I like to have a day to go around it. So I'll take a laser level and I'll survey out that design. And I'll go, okay, that's going to work. Oh, hang on, no, I've got to adjust that. But if you're, if you're putting in a dam, well, you need to do the dam first and then connect whatever element, whether it's a swale, terrace, etc., off that dam, because you don't know the finished height of the wall. You can perceive that it's going to be 7 meters, whatever, but you don't know. Generally, you don't know the geology. You do a test slice, a test hole, to see the quality of the material, and then you start forming. Building a dam is an art. Yes, you can have sciences behind it, but it is an art form. So I'll do that, and I always say to the client, we're better off doing as little as possible for the biggest impact, but then we can always come back and add more later. So yeah, really, it's reading the landscape with the aerial imagery, looking at the contour map so you can get a gauge of the form of the land. But for a lot of people starting out, really, it's learning how to survey. That's probably one of the biggest things, because then you can actually. I taught a course a couple of years ago now in Tasmania, and it was a land planning course, and the students there were looking at the contour maps and they weren't making sense, which is understandable. But as soon as I took them out and I said, okay, so see that contour line there? That should be here. Let's survey that line out so they can actually see it in reality. Then they went, oh, that contour map's not right. And I went, exactly. Not always right. They're not always. They're better and they're better. But generally, the ones you get off your government platforms aren't real good. Often in Australia, they're 1 in 10 metres. A lot can happen within that 10 metres. So you're better off. If the client's serious, yes, you can pay for a LiDAR map, which is much better. But you've still got to get out and survey out the landscape, set it all out, and walk the client through the site, so you can start to paint a picture and work out how you can tie things in. On this last job I've done, I started working out, well, yes, I cut a big terrace into the landscape. Well, I've cut the top off and the bottom off. And that's one of the things that people don't think about when they go and put swales in, is you can't access up and down the slope because you've created a barrier. So what I've started to do is I've run off, when you come to a ridge, I've ran a ramp off the ridge so you can go off the terrace down onto the ridge. And when you go up to a valley, I've come up into a valley or a little ridge. So I've cut access into the top and the bottom of the terrace just to create interaction or integration. But yeah, focusing on that basic mainframe, storing water in the landscape, storing water in dams, and set up that basic theme, and it can always come back and do more.
So if I wanted to learn now surveying, earthworks, and where would you recommend someone go to learn that?
Well, someone who's doing the work. I mean, it's a tricky one in that. Well, like you can do that on any earthworks site, but and it's very simple. Of what all I do is I set out one height across the landscape, and everything I do has a relationship to that height. So I've set up a datum point, and I'm taking that across the landscape. I'm excavating below that point, whether that's 200-300 millimeters, and I'm building up above that point, whether that's 200 or 300 millimeters. So I've basically created a ditch like that. So there's my height that I started with, my original height. That is my spillway height. So it's very simple. I'm looking at doing some online stuff. I'm not trying to plug my own course, but I think it's really needed. Other than if you can't find someone in your local area who knows what they're doing when it becomes to doing these earthworks, because we need to do it. We can't start doing earthworks without the surveying part. One, we've got to give the operator confidence that he knows where he's going. We've also got to give him confidence that we know what we're talking about. Because if you're going to build a dam, well, you need to build like a swale or a terrace, you need a freeboard. So the water never goes over the mound. It's always going to be forced out to the spill point. Spillways, I always do what they call a level sill spillway. So that's basically like a window sill. So water comes along there and sheets over the whole sill. So it's never running in a little valley, and that'll cause erosion. There's Richard Perkins up in Sweden. That might be a bit far away. There's a couple of guys in France. I can't remember their names. There's a few in Portugal. There's what's his name? Permaculture. I don't know his last name, but he's a good guy from Canary Islands. He works with Water Stories. Is a good platform to get onto. It's I've signed up as a course, doing a course with them. mainly just to refine. It's a different approach, so I'm just trying to retrain my brain somewhat. But it's a great platform. It's like a social media for water. It's free to join. Yes, you can take a course, etc. But it's got some good content on there, good examples. So that's a one avenue. Um, yeah, look,
Yeah.
I not knowing really Europe that well.
Well,
I
it's
can't
just
really
it's
say.
I think it's just in general. So I think you've answered it quite well there. I think water stories is one that's quite popular. I think I have seen that, and then I suppose then it's just getting out and doing it and putting what you learn into practice.
Yes, yes. No, it is, and that's where it comes back to starting that small scale, because the principles are exactly the same. You know, small or large, you're still going through the same process. You're still measuring. You're still setting out a height across the landscape, so you know that's level, and then you're excavating down. Um, or you can bring material in and build it up. You know, so you hold water in that terrace, but you still got a height difference from the top of the mound to the floor, and then the water's sitting in here because you need a certain amount of freeboard. When you have a big rain event, water fills up, and then it's got to go over the spillway before it goes over the mound. So, I see people getting, doing the floor of the swale or terrace Zen style. And for me, it's like, if it's in within 20 mil, that's fine. Because water equalises, it's going to bring in sediments anyway. On large scale, that's sort of what I go for. Yeah, if it's 20 mil high, okay, I might cut a bit off it. If it's low, I don't worry about it. Because
Do you
water
see?
naturally is going to bring sediments in. It's a deposition system. So it's going to build soil anyway. So don't get caught up on that. The only thing I really focus on is doing your spillways right. On small scale stuff, well, it doesn't really matter. But on large scale, like when you're dealing with a few hundred acres or etc. of catchment or roads, and when you're picking up water off a road, then it's a lot of water that's going to come at speed. And that's why I call swales shock absorbers. The job that I done that I was just talking about in Canberra, I chose to do a swale up the top because I knew it's going to have a massive surge of water that comes off the road. So that's all 100% runoff off a dual lane highway. So I knew that a terrace doesn't have, it's more subtle, and the freeboard is thinner. So you don't have much meat to hold it, whereas the swale, you can do them big and chunky, so it can take a big impact. So that's sort of the reason. I've got a nice article on my website, docspice.life, about why I choose swales over terraces. And I'm just doing another one because there's a great thing from Regarians or keyline system called gradient roads, which I've done a few of, and they're fantastic. So they're like a diversion drain. So they're a road, but they've got a gradient on them, so they feed water to a dam. The issue, they're fantastic, but the issue is when you go off the level and you continue to give something a fall, you can't spill the water back here. Whereas if you're on the level, I can choose wherever I want along that whole section of work I've done where I want the spillway. It can run water to a dam, the dam can fill up, and then it can back flood up and then overflow. So that's the subtleties. But this is where the surveying needs to come in, because once you nut out the surveying part, and it's very simple, the biggest thing that people have got to learn is when you move the laser level, you've got to go back, put your staff back on the last height that you took. Because I don't know if that makes sense, but when the old style with the theodolite, the dumpy level, you're reading the number. So I've seen so many people trying to find that number again where you can't. So if you go along, you set your laser level up, you've got your height that you're starting from. You put your staff down and you adjust your receiver up to go beep beep, flat line. Okay, that's my height. You survey around, but when you come to a ridge, you can't get to the other side, or you hit a big tree, you can't get to the other side. So you've got to actually pick up your laser level and move it around to the other side of the ridge, reset it up, and come back with your staff, put it on the last height that you shot, and adjust your receiver. And that's back to that same datum point. So because the number on the staff's going to be different, but you're just transferring that height around. So there's a few subtleties in working this out, but honestly, once you've done it a few times, it's very simple. Laser levels are fantastic because they're a one-man operation or one-person operation. The older I get, I'd like to have someone on side there so I don't have to jump on and off the machine. The bigger the machine, the bigger the jump, I can tell you.
Yeah.
But they're so easy to use, and they're relatively cheap these days. You can buy a cheap one. They just don't do the distance. But even, I'm working on big broadacre stuff, and primarily in Australia. Look, it could be a couple of 100 acres, but you're rarely ever shooting a distance of over 100, 200 metres. You're always just moving. And so the lesser quality ones, they're all right. You don't have to break the bank to buy one.
Yeah, so what I'm hearing is maybe there's an opportunity for some whippersnapper to do your running for you and maybe learn something.
Yeah. Look, that'd be good. Yeah. Look, you learn a lot by. I still watch different earth movers because I'm still learning. I'm pretty good on a machine, but I still learn. I still watch. Because as we know, the more you learn, the more you realise you have to learn. It's a never-ending journey, and partly why I'm taking the water storage course, just to learn different approaches. There's also Darren Doherty's Regain platform. It's fantastic. Darren does great work. I couldn't recommend him enough. Particularly if you want to move into the whole regen ag platform, well, Darren's the man because he's got all the sums. He can going through the Regarians platform. You're helping the farmer design their site, but it's got to be economically viable. A homestead, homesteading or a permaculture homestead is different to a commercial venture. There's huge merit in setting up homesteads. I say to people, we need to build our lifeboats. We need to put life around our houses and create the view. And that's why I feel like placing water in the landscape, because it's such a great feeling. In our old house, I put in a couple of dams. The one was out the front of the house, so we could look at it from the kitchen window, the lounge room window. You get the sun reflecting on it. You get bird life coming across. We created a view, and you also get all the benefits because water is the ultimate thermal mass. It's the ultimate temperature regulator. It's like why do deserts get hot and cold? Because there's no water. Why does the forest act differently in temperature to an open pasture? Trees, as Bill said, trees are essentially an above ground lake. So placing water and trees in the landscape, and I'm not sure if you know of Dr. He talks about breathing your biome. And in Japan, where I am now, they prescribe forest bathing. So there's a lot of merit for creating that lifeboat around your house for sanity, actually. Of course, it's going to give us real food because we want to place our garden near our kitchen and have a nice outdoor area that we can sit and chill and recharge from the madness of the world, and put tree systems around the house so it functions as a design. we exclude the cold wind, we invite the cool summer breeze in, we create the microclimate, etc. And we get the beauty of trees and the life that comes in. We get the shade and the humidity in summer and all that. So, but yeah, it's horses for courses. If you're really looking at the whole regen ag platform for commercial farmers, well, then you can't get any better than the Gregarians platform. But if you want to do the sort of homesteading permaculture lifeboat sort of thing, well, there's many of us out there doing it. I
Yeah,
sort of put in both worlds, but
yeah.
that's
You
tightrope. I'll try to
you
walk.
mentioned there. Sorry, forest bathing.
Forest
So
bathing, yeah, mate.
yeah, it just triggered a thought I had like two weeks ago. There was a photograph of the school. So the school have an eco club and they have a garden, and all the kids there were wearing disposable medical gloves doing their gardening.
Mm.
It's like, uh,
Crazy
uh,
world, mate. Oh, well,
uh,
the healthy soil has the most powerful antidepressant microbes. It informs our biome, our gut biome. We need to re-inoculate ourselves. But yeah, it's a hard one to, as Bill said, bloody your knuckles against closed doors.
yeah, and
But
they
slowly
have
the world is.
yeah, and they have kids aren't allowed in the grass. They have a growing area which they're not
Mm,
allowed in. So they get all their
mm.
certificates and the awards, but then it's not to me. It was and then you have forest bathing where I think the Wayne should be actually out getting their hands dirty, getting their nails black.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah,
and,
yeah, yeah.
uh,
Engage. Yeah,
yeah, so
yeah.
that is a form of
Well,
forest
I
bathing.
think society suffers a bit of depression because we've disassociated ourselves from nature, and we're not, and then therefore we don't revere it and then don't protect it. I think if we were engaged more, and that's where I really see it important, as this sort of lifeboat concept of even on a small scale, perhaps what you're doing at your place is creating that life support system around your house. And then people see it, talk all you want as far as I'm concerned, but show me what you've done and I'll listen. That's sort of where I've come to. And so, acting is power and demonstration is the way to go. That's sort of where I come from anyway. It
Well,
was like I never started reading the. Sorry.
that's what my daughter said to me. She says, "Daddy, you talk a lot about permaculture, but you don't actually show anybody what you're doing."
Sounds like my daughter. Yeah,
uh,
like I never read a book until I was about 23, and when I did, I had to have a dictionary because I couldn't really comprehend any words. But one of the most powerful things I read was the word educate in Latin is to lead out, to demonstrate the way. So if we want to talk, we have to demonstrate, and then people listen because they observe and they can't argue about it. The proof's there. Yes, you can come up with all the excuses, but if you can demonstrate it, well then it's there for people to plant the seed. To look at and go, oh wow, that's interesting. You know, yeah, and like I know, like syntropic ag is starting to kick off pretty big in Europe as well, isn't it?
yeah, well, there is a. I don't know if it's a debate so much. It's just people are commenting. It's just. It's like people have taken this centropic ag and it's like a separate thing, but is it not just part of the bigger picture?
Yeah, well, look, a really
Uh,
good point, because what gets me is all this bloody ego in the whole movements. Okay, and we almost we put it's this thing like teachers. We revere our teacher. Our teacher says this, therefore we have to stick to that formula. Well, teachers have a huge responsibility to break that, and like that's my realization after doing some teaching. But so we get fixated on that's permaculture. No, that's syntropic ag. Oh, that's regen ag. Or hang on, now in Australia we've got natural sequence farming. Well, they all work. Can't we just blend them all together in different contexts and use them? Like,
Yeah.
come on. Yeah, it's a bit of madness. It's I don't
the
know
one
if
that
it's
gets
protection.
I don't know, but the funniest one for me is always the regenerative movement, particularly the language they use. It's like they're talking a different language at times, and it has to include this terms like inclusivity. Let's instead of just let's have a meeting together. Oh, they have terms for all these things, and it's like it's this closely guarded thing that sometimes I just be sitting there going, go and just say what it is instead of all this faff language around it. It's and then
Yeah.
I'll not say the phrase that I use. It's
I won't either. Yeah, there's a lot of waffle out there. You know, if it works, just use it, and you know it's guarded. You know.
Yeah, well, I'll edit this bit out, but I just call it a big circle jerk. Like they're all just.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
well, you know, we've got to make it approachable for people, and by creating this, you know, unique language to a group, it's just isolating everyone. And that's not the way to go. We need to engage people and make them go, oh, wow, that's interesting. Common language, simple language is power. You know, that's what, whenever I do teaching, and I'm not articulate anyway, but like I found that if you can speak simple language, it's very powerful for the newcomers to learn. To lay it out in basic, you know, a basic storyline, really. When I've got two lots of kids, but when my oldest kids were young, I struggled reading a story time book to them. So I used to tell them stories. And really, you know, I perfected the art of storytelling on them. And I've taken that to teaching because I think it's a very powerful way of delivering information if we can break it down into simple language. Plus, you know, my wife's Japanese, so for the first 18 months that we were together, we spoke through a dictionary. It's hard to argue, but I knew when she was talking in Japanese, she wasn't happy. But anyway, so I learned that bit. But it really taught me a lot about communication and explaining something in simple language. Australians are bloody terrible in that we don't have sentences. All our words are all connected together, you know, like how's it going, mate? Yeah, good, over the hill there. Yeah, no worries. You know, and I had to learn really to break my language up into short sentences. But simple language is powerful. And, you know, all we need to do is just give people the directive to act, which is, you know, one of the permaculture sort of, you know, actions really, or one of the things that grabbed me was creating that directive to act, you know, and it drives the directive. Well, put a garden in, get some rainwater, you know, clean water, you know, yeah. So it gives you directive to act, and that's the best way forward is action, demonstration. It's all sort of simple stuff in the end, and don't complicate it, and you know, keep your design simple, you know.
Dave,
But the
that
proof
is
is in the pudding.
yeah, that is a great place to end it. Thank you very much. For those who didn't realize, we had to do this in 2 takes due to some technical issues. But I'll blend it together seamlessly. You'll never even know in the audio until I've told
All
you.
good, mate.
Dave, is there anything you want to say before we finish the recording? Where do people find you?
Well, yeah, they can find me at docspice.life and Instagram. I'm on docspice_permaculture. Facebook, I've just had a bit of an issue with my Facebook page. It's disappeared at the moment, but the old one's still there. You can still see it. And I've just started TikTok. I'm trying to become a TikToker because I've seen you on there, Cormac, and I'll give that a crack. So you can find me on there. Look, you know, I do online designs if people want that basic mainframe stuff. And I'm looking at doing a bit of online teaching and trying to move my world into online a bit. But anyway, I'm just happy to jump on a podcast like this and share my experience. I've been fortunate that I've had a long experience, and I just like to share it to make sure we keep it real and keep the ego out of it, keep the cultism out of it. Whatever works, use it. That's the way to go.
That's great. Great advice. Thanks very much. There's been a ton of value today, and there,
Cool, mate.
and I'll be certainly going over it myself when I'm done.
Oh, good.
Guys, that's been
Pleasure.
Doc Spice on the Permaculture Fine podcast, and we'll catch you all next week. Cheers.